what I want to report on is the progress that's been made by our working group on political-administrative relations on developing a module. I should say first that it is very much a group effort. It's been working for some time, involving a number of people. So what I'm presenting here is an effort for a number of people, not least Tony Behind, Alexander Abramovich, Bernadette Cohen, and others. We think we're addressing a relatively classic question in study of public administration. That is, how does the political world interface with the administrative world? How do these two sets of actors actually manage to work together, or not, as the case may be? And linking these two worlds. And arguably, too, the linkage is maybe becoming more problematic because of some of the changes in the state and the way in which governments carry out. What we have developed so far in this, and as a plan, is a set of building blocks for the study of political administrative relations. And you'll see those on there. So the first of these is essentially the foundation of the study, the classic text in this area. And we're then trying in this block to address what are the issues in the study of this relationship, to try to map the available literature that exists, and really to look to some extent at the formal legal relationships that exist here. And Leuven has developed a set of questions that go along with these blocks. So we're at the point of really developing a teaching format for the use of these relationships. The second block is one of trying to dissect European traditions in political administrative relations, which we argue is crucial, as we've been debating this morning and were certainly yesterday afternoon, that there's no single tradition here, there's no single conception of this relationship or public administration, and that this needs then to fit with broader government traditions. And some of those would be, for example, thank you, Ms. Halder, these are one list we had. There could be as many traditions as there are countries, or perhaps more, given that some countries may have internal conflicting traditions. We had quite a debate on this in the other working group yesterday afternoon. This slide was prepared before that, so I may get some brickbats from the group who were there yesterday afternoon. But here are just a set of possible traditions within which to think about these relationships occurring. Third module in the book, or in the presentation of political administrative relationships, or third is the beginning of a set of factors about what shapes these relationships. The first being the legal relationships, conceptions of ministerial responsibility, institutional context. The second of the shaping factors that we will talk about are the political context, the importance of coalition government, and particularly with some of the work that Lachlan Voss has been doing on coalition government in this area, changing party systems and changing forms of accountability within political systems. Also, then thirdly, in terms of the shaping factors, economic systems, the role of the state as an economic actor, the links with the private sector, and alternative models of this interaction between state and economy, and indeed the changing nature of the links between state and economy. Sixthly, and quite purposefully, we get into the questions of comparison relatively late in the day, wanting to lay to some extent the foundations before we begin to impose any sort of conceptual framework on people in advance. And we look at the comparison through 3 or 4 different ways. One is the use of ideal type models, to some extent the ones that I have developed. Secondly, the work that's been done through survey work on roles and perceptions of public administrators and politicians as they interact. Thinking here of the work particularly of Rebecca Buckingham and Rockland as a foundation. Thirdly, the work beginning with the work of Chris Hood to some extent on what he calls the Schafferian bargain between public servants and their ministers. But essentially that this relationship being a bargain between two sets of actors almost in a contractual sense. And then trying to look also at the particular role of the European context and European governance as framing some of that relationship. Thank you. Then we go on to the evolution of these relationships and the role of new public management, what in the reform of public administration, reform of the state, over the past several decades has altered this relationship. And the nature of the reforms and the impact of those reforms on how politicians and public administrators work with one another. Penultimately, we talk about Europeanization and internationalization, again, as impacts upon and changes in this relationship. The nature of administration within the European Union, international organizations, and use of administrative criteria for accession for the candidate countries. Then the final part of this list of ideas is a sort of self-examination of the relevance of the models as they exist. How transferable are models intersystemically? Do national models really help us understand what's happening in a broader context? And perhaps most importantly, what else do we need to know if we really want to understand how politics and administration work together? So as I say, we've moved rather far, I think, at least in conceptualizing the teaching program out of these ideas with these blocks. And Alexandra has prepared a quite extensive bibliography and syllabus for a course that is available. And we're hoping to develop out of this then a written book that would follow pretty much this outline. And try to do it instead of country by country, but theme by theme. Try to make it genuinely comparative, not to steal author's topic, but to try to make it genuinely comparative in the way in which we look at these, looking at more conceptually perhaps than country by country. I have a few copies of a short paper and of the syllabus with me, and if anyone else is interested, leaving your name and address, I'll be happy to send them to you. Thanks to Hertz Mailing. Pleasure to do it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Guy. Any questions to this brief presentation? People have asked me repeatedly, so what's the idea of the joint models? And the brief answer is we don't know, in the sense that we're trying out to find ways of analyzing PA from a European perspective, and given the task to a number of people and ask them to answer the question. So what you will see this morning is a number of ways of doing it. There's no one way, and we don't know if there will be one way. I don't think there will. And this is reflected by the different kind of ideas and way of presenting that lies behind. There's no idea about having one module or several modules running all places. There's no idea of having it integrated by ICT or whatever. But all those things could be done. There's possibilities, and anyone having opinions, ideas about this is cordially invited to the floor and tell about it.
Have you already reflected on how you could use this in a long-distance collaborative affair? How to use the ICT component in this, and does it put special requirements or open special possibilities, or how is this integrated into the work of this working group, or is that something of a later stage?
That's, I think, a later stage, unless some of my colleagues have thought this through. Tony's probably thought through better than I.
Well, there's one issue is that a lot of we've also, but there was no time for that to be presented, been looking at literature, and one of the things that we need to get is original materials from other countries that are in languages that are not accessible, which then would need to be translated with hopefully funds from the network, and be put on a website where teachers that want to teach the module and use the materials could download those translated materials that would be course materials for themselves. So we have a website where the module would be put out, which would both contain references to the sources, but also materials that would otherwise not be available to people. So using that as a way to get people access to materials that otherwise would not be accessible. And this would also make it actually feasible to deliver the module, because if we don't have such a facility, I don't think it will ever fly.
Okay. Well,
All right. Thank you. We will move on then to next presentation.